Jordan can join us if and when she's able to. Okay. So, Deputy Chief Henley, would you mind reading the remote meeting statement, please?
No, I don't mind at all. Thank you. I guess you'd be Chair Robinson. Good evening. I just have a few housekeeping items for the Zoom meeting. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and cable channel 25. Please remember to mute yourself during the meeting unless you are speaking. The chat function for the meeting is disabled. All chats will go directly to me. Unless you are participating during the meeting, please turn off your video. This allows the active meeting participants to be seen on screen. You will still be able to hear the meeting. When you are participating in the meeting, please turn your video on. If you have any trouble, you can send me a chat message. The city reserves the right to mute people or turn individual videos off to minimize distractions during the meeting. And now I'll turn the meeting back over to Chair Robinson.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Heffley. So we're going to begin tonight's meeting with a moment of silence for Jayland Walker, the unarmed Black man who was shot over 60 times and killed by police last week in Akron, Ohio. After the moment of silence, we'll hear a statement from Chief Lockhart. Chief, if you could, your statement, please.
Thank you. I want to thank the CPRB for the opportunity to speak openly and publicly about the Jayland Walker shooting in Akron, Ohio. Like many of you and members of our community, when I watched the body camera video of the incident, I found it very disturbing. While I cannot speak specifically on this case because I do not have access to all the information, I want to be very clear that our use of force policy places the sanctity of life in its opening statement. It reads, "The Lawrence Police Department holds in high regard the value of human life and the dignity of all persons without prejudice." The portion of the policy was updated when we banned chokeholds. We also recognize the use of force requires monitoring, evaluation, and a careful balancing of all interests. We work closely with the Lawrence NAACP to move de-escalation to a prominent place in our policy. Officers dealing with people during crisis situations, and many times people are not making rational decisions. That is exactly why the areas of emphasis in our official policy are important, and our policy at the Lawrence Police Department strongly emphasizes de-escalation. Of course, a good policy is only as good as the training and supervision behind it. We regularly train on our use of force policy informally during shift briefings, and most recently in our mini academy. The training scenario in our mini academy dealt with an armed motorist. Officers had to use their de-escalation training to successfully resolve the situation. Practice and training are critical, and I mandate it, period. Pursuits are challenging situations. Clearly, this situation did not end the way anyone hoped. Supervisors at LKPD are alerted and command any pursuit, which ensures it is limited to only the cars and officers necessary to resolve the situation. Again, a focus on de-escalation. When incidents like this occur, we take the time to examine it and provide updates to policy and training if we see areas for improvement. This will happen once we have more information on this situation. I want to reassure our community that we are committed to providing a safe and secure Lawrence for everyone, as outlined in our strategic plan. We continue to listen to our community as we work to reimagine policing in Lawrence. And one final note, I think talking about these types of incidents is a good thing. It's never the result we want on our end, and fear is natural, but it's my job to support the officers who protect you and also explain what we do, why we do it, and the ways we work to prevent this type of outcome. So I want to thank the board for this opportunity.
Thank you, Chief. Do we have any comments from board members? Board Member Taylor.
Board Member Marie Taylor. So I talked with Jenny Robinson, Chair, about the need to put this on the agenda, because I could not fathom having to sit on this board and not say Jayland Walker's name, and to pay respect to what happened to him, and that should not have happened to anyone's family member. And as these incidents continue to happen, it's fueling distrust. It is fueling fear among Black and Brown people. And even if it doesn't happen in Lawrence, it could happen in Lawrence. And that's what we feel, the weight on people. And I'm not talking as a spokesperson. I'm talking as like a human being, a mother, a sister. And it's just really hard. And so I just feel like we had to at least address it and have the chief speak on it to figure out like what this means for Lawrence. And the brutality of what we saw is just unimaginable, and I cannot believe it happened. And here we are again. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Taylor. Board Member Minor, and then Board Member Littleton.
Yes, the situation with Jayland Walker is a very serious situation. But I think it's very good for Lawrence that we have made the changes in police policy procedures to further prevent this, or provide our officers with the understanding of the level of tolerance that will be allowed in this community. I think we're very lucky on the aspect of not being like some of the other communities where they have to deal with this matter. It's an unfortunate situation. And from what the little bit I saw from the media, which I'm taking with a grain of salt, I mean, almost close range shooting. And the handcuffing after the individual had passed. There's just certain things that a community needs to understand and not tolerate. And it's good that the Lawrence community has made proactive measures. And that's the most important thing, is we take proactive measures in regards to reducing the situations that we're seeing across the country.
Thank you, Board Member Minor. Board Member Littleton.
And this Board Member Littleton, thanks, Jenny. I just want to concur with both what Marie and James are saying, not take up a lot of time, but I do appreciate the chief addressing this and putting this right out on the table and giving us some insight how that connects the dots here. So thank you for doing so.
I'd like to make space, if possible, for public comment on this matter, if there is any.
There is public comment here in the room.
Is public comment. Am I unmuted? Can you hear me, board?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. I find it incredibly offensive that this chief would come in here and talk about a crime that happened 2 states away, but he won't address any of the situations that I presented to this board or this chief that have happened right here in Lawrence, Kansas. And he won't even look me in the eyes anymore. Won't talk to me, won't look me in the eyes. Let's address some situations that have happened here. We've seen officers use excessive force here, and this board has remained silent. We've seen officers use excessive force here, and the police have remained silent while they change policies and cover things up to hide it. We don't release public records the way we're supposed to, so we can't find out any information about it. But you guys are going to come in here and talk about Jayland Walker. Now, I have a lot of understanding of the Jayland Walker situation, because if you're not aware, there was another exact same shooting that happened. You can go to Lawrence Accountability and see the video that's not being monetized, because I thought it needed to be seen by the public. These shootings are not just a one-off. They are a part of training. That's part of why they don't want the shooting range to be public, because they want to go in there and train how to blow someone away. They want to pop off clips, not train with weapons like we did in the military. There is weapons training, and it's not what the police are doing. And you guys spent all this time talking about Jayland Walker, but you guys have not made a single second to talk about Adil Kassim or the individual who was on Mass Street, I believe his name was Felix, that had Daubert's knees put in his back. How about we have those discussions here? But we can't even talk about those here, but you're going to express sympathy for a guy that happened 2 states away. I think that's a cop-out, and it's a way to avoid talking about local issues because he can come in here and openly and freely talk about Jayland Walker, but we can't openly and freely talk about the citizens of Lawrence. What is wrong with that, guys? Seriously, I'm going to keep my cool tonight and respect the board, but I do not respect any of these men here tonight.
Thank you for your comment, Michael. I see public comment from Stephen Watts.
We've got another one in person also.
Let's go first.
Oh, okay.
You can take the one in person.
Sir.
We'll take
Go
the
ahead.
other in-person public comment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jeremy Rothschild, Lawrence, Kansas, the radical middle of America. I was actually going to reference information that I'd been attuned to by Mr. Stephen Watts, which is I believe it's called Lexapro, which is a cut and paste policy handbook that's used around the country by police departments, including, it looks like, for statewide policy in California. And it looks like it works to create policy that basically plays right up against the line of the law in terms of the definition of imminent threat. And what imminent might mean. And so my concern is that if we're using these same kind of handbooks here in Lawrence, that we are setting up a situation where, for reasons of wanting to get away legally after some kind of incident that has been referenced, that we are going to actually escalate the policy that ends up in that kind of situation and then it being justified. So I just wanted to comment on that matter. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we can go next to Stephen Watts.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. I appreciate you opening this up. And in furtherance of that, let's try to be more than 3 minutes to talk in public reaction to stuff, because there's no rule or law that says 3 minutes. This is some asinine thing that's been discovered. But I share the sentiments that's been given. What about Andrew Finch's murder in Wichita, Kansas? The guy's in his own bed and the cops come and shoot him. Incredible. Nobody did anything. Okay, what this other guy was just saying, right. Just a moment. If you don't, I want to quote what these guys said. Okay. Mr. Lockhart was talking about, the policy. Right. Exactly. I agree. Policy. But the policy for Lawrence is written out of Lawrence. It's written by a right-wing think tank, Lexi Poll, not pro, Lexi Poll. I've talked to the board about this repeatedly. It does not, it gives police the same powers that the Stasi had in East Germany. It's incredible. And we just let it happen. I understand that it's not easy, but at the same time, I'm in a room with a virtual room with people making $100,000 a year and they want to climb. It's just incredible, Ms. Robinson. It's incredible. That man, he was the training that occurs in our community for the police. It doesn't have anything to do with education or training. It has to do with an overall attitude. And these people who sign up nowadays, they want to be G.I. Joe. Send them off to Fallujah if they want to go shoot people and be shot at. That isn't happening here in Lawrence. Why do we underscore the utilization of warrior training for police in hillbilly Hicksville, Lawrence, Kansas? I like it being hillbilly Hicksville, Lawrence, Kansas. That's why I'm here. You can put a lipstick on a pig. It's still a pig. Okay, well, I have some public comments. We'll get to those next. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Stephen. Okay, we're going to go ahead, if that's all from the board as well, to move on to our next item, which is approving minutes from our June 9th meeting. Do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
This is Board Member Minor. I make a motion to approve the June minutes.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second. We'll go ahead and vote to approve the minutes. I'm assuming Board Member Littleton, will you abstain today?
I will abstain. Thank you, Board Member Littleton.
Board Member Taylor, yay or nay?
Board Member Murray Taylor, yay.
Board Member Minor,
Board Member Minor, yay.
Board Member Bickford,
Board Member Bickford, yay.
okay, Chair Robinson, yay. Oh. Is my timer going off? Okay, we have voted to approve the minutes from our June 9th meeting. We'll move on to public comment. The public is allowed to speak at public comment after first being recognized by the chair, except that any complaints or comments regarding individually identifiable officers are not allowed. Rather, any such comments or complaints may be provided to the board in writing, and the board will forward such comment or complaint to the appropriate person within the Lawrence Police Department. The board may establish reasonable limitations on the allowable length of public comment. We've agreed upon 3 minutes. As a general practice, the board will not discuss or debate these items, nor will it make decisions on items presented during this time. Do we have public comment? It looks like we have Stephen remotely. Are we able to start with Stephen or?
Sure. Go ahead with Stephen.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Michael. Sorry. There's a lot of different screens up here. We'll go ahead and start with Stephen.
Thank you. Firstly, I'd like to talk about the minutes. The minutes are useless because they do not include the public comment. There's no he said, she said. Even in the minutes of what you guys say, there's no taste or feel for it actually what is going on. Next, I have no clue after more than 3 years of this stuff, 3 years for me and then some, what each of you stand for. I don't know what you stand for. I know what I stand for. I want a strong Citizens Police Review Board that does everything. I mean, writes the policy, does the supervision, takes the complaints, everything. We tell the police what to do. They don't tell us what to do. Number one. Number two, I don't know where you stand in this stuff. I'd like to know. I'd like each of you to say, you have done nothing but you have wasted your time and given what little progress was made back to these guys. Now they're here. Why are they here? They need to be here to show up and shut up and be told what to do. They don't like that. I understand that. I get it. However, this is heavy duty stuff that we're going on here. Now, with this other fellow in the crowd, I'm sorry I can't remember names. If it's not written down, I don't do very well. And it's hard to pull this information up and do this stuff, which is why 3 minutes doesn't cut it. What's the rush? The meeting started off with you getting rushed by Lockhart. It's incredible. At any rate, what are we going to do about biometrics and the purchase of all of this software? When it was purchased 2 years ago, I was talking about it. I said, what the hell is this? And they went, I knew what it was. And I got dismissed. They put in the budget, we're going to purchase a tactical computer. What the hell is a tactical computer? It's a computer or a forensic computer. It's just a computer with software. Anyway, I'm frightened by what progress has done for the invasion of privacy and the no controls over the police department and how they are using this Israeli-based software. Please, can you guys flex some muscle? I mean, you don't have to do what Brandon McGuire tells you to do. You tell him what to do. He works for us. Brandon, we want this. Not can we? Hell no. And where did all of the authority go? You've been neutered. And was her name Gordon? I can't remember the name. She resigned, despite having participated in turning this into an academic exercise. These are not easy times for anybody, including Lockhart and Heffley. They got tough jobs, and I understand that. And you know what? I might believe in them. We're in a town that let the police union run a black chief of police out of town, and we still don't know what the hell for. And we're never going to know. Why not? So Heffley and Lockhart got to deal with these guys. I understand, the walking that line, but we need to please flex your muscle for a while. Let's get something accomplished here. Don't let Marie Garten, whatever her name is, the town lawyer, Tony Wheeler and Marie Gonzalez and Marie Taylor. I had a conversation with you, Marie, and you told me that, you know, you wanted to see this racially biased focus. Okay, well, now we focused on nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Do we have in-person public comment as well?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, go ahead, Michael.
Stephen, her name was Jane Gibson, and Chief Lockhart is the reason she resigned. I'm pretty sure it was after that little Ford Chrysler conversation that was really kind of interesting. Tonight, I want to talk about the complaint process. This is going to be a completely outside what you expected, but I found out some information this week. I've had emails back and forth with a board member, and I've had some emails back and forth with the records, and I've had a bit of a confrontation with Bill Corey. We had a heavy patrol running through my neighborhood all of a sudden. I felt like it was intimidation, so I called it out. Tried to find out who the officer was so that I could make a complaint in B1. Nobody wanted to tell me who that officer was. Bill Corey came out and said that unless I had an actual interaction with that officer, I have no right to find out his name. So we require actual interactions to find out somebody's name. Now, how in the hell is somebody supposed to submit a third-party complaint about something they witnessed looking out their window on a police officer if we can't do it and we can't find out names unless we had an actual interaction with them? Now, I'm going to tell you how that's difficult and the reason why this comes into play. Because I submitted an open record request, and I think this board needs to remember that you guys operate under the Kansas Open Records Act, and you are not allowed to have any more information than I should be allowed to have from the police department if that is true. But I don't think that's true because I'm being blocked in an interesting way. I submitted a request to the Lawrence Police Department requesting a document, I think I might have set a record, sufficient to identify the individual police officer driving Unit B1 during a specific time in a specific neighborhood at a specific date. What I got back was an indication from Kim Murphy, the head of records, and you guys are going to love this. There is no responsive record. Now, what that would mean is that she's trying to tell us that the police department does not follow the policies as far as it goes, or the actual laws as far as it goes to keeping records for what officers are doing. So they're saying that there's no responsive record to what officer is driving a car. I'm asking, how in the hell is that possible? So we don't inspect our vehicles when we start our shift. We don't write down mileage. We don't sign a form that says we've taken control of this car for a period of time. Do we not do any of that stuff, Chief? It doesn't sound like it because apparently there's no responsive record, guys. Now you operate under this core policy. How are you supposed to get records if this is the way they treat it? Now I found out who was in B3. That's our good buddy. And there's a reason they don't want to know. They don't want me to know that it's because he's one of the officers that would have a motivation to start cruising my neighborhood because he doesn't like the fact I caught him muting a body cam talking about an investigation when they unjustly pulled somebody off their porch, threw him to the ground, and later made him plead guilty to the charges of interfering. And you guys want $2.5 million more. 2.5 more. Well, we got to close down stuff. That's a greedy mindset. You can't go to shooters and shoot, can you? Do they not like you there? Or do you not feel comfortable there? How come you can't go to shooters and shoot your guns off?
And Michael, would you be able to finish in the next 30 seconds or so?
Oh, I sure can. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
But the last thing I want to say is I can't wait for the day when we catch you guys popping off rounds like what we see on TV. Because you know it's coming.
Thank you, Michael.
Greetings, Jeremy Rothkushel, Radical Middle American from Radical Middle America, Lawrence, Kansas. Board, I submitted public comment today in written form with a bunch of links that substantiate and found the fact that we do have a contract with the Israeli security state-founded BriefCam, video biometrics analytics. It was submitted and signed off on in 2019. And then there's a line item for it in 2020. It looks to be a 3-year contract, which very likely means that it's coming up for a recontracting next year. So we need to talk about this now in terms of the specific case. Now, I would remind the board in terms of the targeting and the killing of Black men, that this foreign security state, Israel, has been well recognized at this point to be an apartheid government, ethno-religiously biased. I, as a Jewish American patriot of conscience who's involved in First Amendment protected activities around these kinds of very serious security and controversial matters, feel very threatened by the fact that our police department has brought in the security contracting of this foreign military intelligence state that has a history very recently of targeting and assassinating Palestinian American journalists such as Shireen Abu Akleh. They were also Israeli cyber weapons were supplied to the bone saw mafia in Saudi Arabia that was then used to target for a hack job of Washington Post journalist Khashoggi. And by the way, morally, and I'll just remind that my 3 points are we have to deal with biometrics more generally as a society. We need to remember that our form of government here in the United States of America is we the people. We are the ones who founded the government. We're the source of the power of any legitimate state power. And we have to have an oversight into our government, not the other way around. This biometric issue is going to come up more and more in terms of equity, in terms of privacy. Black women are the ones who are most unequally treated by a biometric technology. This state, Israel, was actually in league with the apartheid state of South Africa when it was running its white supremacist policy. Now, this is a what we would call a shonda in Jewish circles in terms of a shame upon this board that it's in line, in bed with this Israeli apartheid state that has shown itself to be a racist state, willing to be in bed in developing nuclear weapons, ethno-specific bioweapons with the South African government, and now on up to this current moment where it's recognized by the best of our U.S. counterintelligence and security services as a top eternal threat in counterintelligence and security alongside such nemesis as China and Russia. Imagine if we were running Russian intelligence software in our databases. We don't even know the basics in terms of once we give our video data over to BriefCam, what do they have, or what servers are those on, what's going on? So I will take up Major Cooper's invitation to visit the police center and ask more questions about this. But the fact of this matter is well established. There's no more plausible deniability. Now we have to deal with the actual facts and implications of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeremy. Do we have any other public comment? And for anyone,
so.
Okay, thank you. For anyone listening, you can access Jeremy's written public comment via our agenda. So now we're going to move on to the agenda items. And before we do that, the chief informed me right before today's meeting that the de-escalation trainer isn't able to be here tonight. So instead, Deputy Chief Adam Heffley will provide an overview of the UAV, or Unmanned Aerial Vehicle, or drone program in his place. So we need a motion and a vote in order to change our agenda. Do we have a motion to change the third agenda item to a presentation on UAV program from the Lawrence Police Department?
This is Board Member Minor. I make a motion to make that change to the third item.
Okay, do we have a second? Board Member Littleton?
This Board Member Stephanie Littleton, I second that motion to change 3 to the UVA program.
Okay. Thank you. We'll go ahead and take a vote to change agenda item number 3 to a presentation on the UAV program with the Lawrence Police Department. Board Member Littleton?
Aye.
Board Member Taylor,
Board Member Marie Taylor, aye.
Board Member Minor,
Board Member Minor, aye.
Board Member Bickford.
Board Member Bickford, nay.
Okay, Chair Robinson, aye. The vote passes. We'll change agenda item number 3 to a presentation about the UAV program. Agenda item number 1 doesn't require a vote. It's just a note from me. We weren't able to get a meeting scheduled with the chief and Sanjay and Brandon to kind of discuss the structure and setting of like our strategic planning for our board. So we're scheduling that meeting now. We're looking at the end of this month. So we should have more information by our next meeting. So thank you for your patience on that. Are there any questions from board members about that? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to our next agenda item, receiving the monthly complaint report from Chief Lockhart.
Thank you, Chair Robinson. I'm happy to report this month that we didn't have any complaints that were disposed of in the month of June.
All right, thank you. Any board discussion about this?
This is Board Member Minor. I know in our last meeting in June, we briefly discussed about the involvement in regards to the board members being involved in or at least an observer in regards to the complaint process and the discussion with the per se officer or officers that were involved. I was reviewing over the documents 9324, 9668, and it allows the opportunity for the board to be involved in it. I know Chief Lockhart said that we will, at least and I'm not speaking for Chief Lockhart, but said that there's an opportunity for board members or a board member to be involved in that process. I think that's a good opportunity for the board itself to go along with this procedure and see how the police department goes about their policy and procedures in regards to a complaint investigation.
Thank you, Board Member Minor. Any feedback from Chief or Deputy Chief?
No, that invitation is extended to all of you. If you'll get in touch with Major Cooper or Lieutenant Unruh, they're happy to sit down with you, go through the whole process, and let you know how we receive and process our complaints.
Board Member Bickford, I have a comment/question. I think last time I was asking about that process, and I did find the complaint page with the forms. I believe that I was told, though, that the actual process of how those investigations were conducted was printed somewhere, and I didn't find that. So is there a link or a page that we could be directed to just in receiving complaints about following that process? I'd like to be able to compare notes.
Yeah, I'll see if I can get that to you tomorrow.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
You bet.
Did Ms. Bickford get any information about using threats as a way to obtain compliance? Sorry. It's the only way you can do it.
Oh, this is Chair Robinson. Stephen, I was going to ask for public comment. Would you like to, let me just make sure there's no further board discussion about this right now, and then I'll take public comment. Does that sound good?
This is Board Member Minor. And as I stated last month that I would review the complaint not so much the complaint process, but the online complaint form. And I found it to be adequate. I did find that maybe the font should have been bigger or something to bring out more attention. But my other concern would be, how does the police department notify an individual that there is an online form? Do they do that through their normal conversation with an individual or things of that nature? Or Do they have that on a business card or things like that? Because I think that's very important, and that they are aware that they can go to that form and put down the incident that occurred and their feelings in regards to what happened.
Any feedback on Board Member Minor's discussion?
We can certainly take a look at how we've communicated that out. I'm sure that we've sent it out in different forms of communication in the past, but we'll take a look at what we're doing right now and see if there's a better way to get that word out.
Okay, any other board discussion on this agenda item before we take public comment? Board Member Littleton.
This board member, Stephen Littleton, just a quick comment. You know, we've been working on this process leading up to the work group for almost 3 or so years now. And so my thinking is not really clear on when we covered this, and Marie might be able to kind of pull something out on this. I'm not sure, but we have talked about it in the past. And I just think kind of moving forward with the work group, it's going to be another component, if you will, that'll be important about how we communicate out the different ways to file a complaint, and then it's online and such. Because I think we had talked about at one point of putting on some type of a note card, if you will, at the library and different points, throughout the city. And that was part of this bigger discussion, on the complaint process over time. So I just think that's another part and parcel to the work group that might be a good thing to keep in mind.
This is Chair Robinson. So Board Member Littleton, you're saying that discussing access and knowledge about how to make a complaint is an important part of the work group.
Correct. Yes. And then communicating that out, refresh the community as to those different ways to do so.
Yeah, that's an important point. Thank you, Board Member Littleton. Any other discussion about this agenda item? Board discussion. Okay, we'll go ahead and take public comment. I see Stephen's hand raised.
Thank you. You understand that the complaint process is nothing but busy work. And the website is busy work as well. I've talked about the website repeatedly with this group in the town. I mean, it underscores a disaffection. The police department doesn't want complaints. And if they get complaints, they're just going to deep six them anyway and do it all internally and stop you from doing anything you want to do because you're too afraid to do, asking permission to do all this stuff. That form, Mr. Minor, it should be such that when you type it, it fills it out and you can print it easily. Additionally, there's no form on there for a compliment. I've asked for it repeatedly. That entire city website for the police is useless. They give a number for desk sergeants. You call that number, nobody answers the goddamn phone. And if they do, everyone, well, I stop. They don't. It's very unsolicitous. It's not fun. It's unhappy voice. This is not police business, that kind of stuff. Going back to this other thing, Ms. Bickford indicated that doing threats in order to get compliance is a little questionable. I wanted to know, and I still want to know, what came of that? Is that the way our police department works, that guys can say, well, I'm going to arrest you for A, B, and C when A, B, and C isn't a problem? How can you trust these guys? This is Lawrence, Kansas. It is not the streets of Fallujah. People are not. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. The complaint process, again, Mr. Minor, I'm embarrassed for you, sir, in terms of you saw that as adequate. Man, that whole thing, you read that thing and it's written as though we don't waste your time with us. Where's the compliment? That's been 2 years. Thanks for doing this, Ms. Robinson. I mean, it's difficult to speak extemporaneously when you feel compelled for time. There has never been a face-to-face or one-on-one or community meeting to talk to the police. It's always been through these circles. It's incredible. And I volunteered and I'm going to do it here publicly. Yeah, I want to be on this committee that sits around with the police and talks about this stuff. Nobody on this committee represents me or people like me. All of you are well-heeled and well-paid and getting your resumes nice and together. Mr. Minor's with the NAACP. It all looks good on paper, but when you get right down to it, with 6, you get egg roll, and we don't have anything yet. This review board is a waste of time until you get energized and say, we want to work with the police. The police need our help. Let's cut their budget by getting rid of the school resource officers and funding the nature center and the humane center. Yeehaw! They don't need to be in the schools. That's not police work. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Do we have any other public comment in person for this agenda item?
Yep.
Yes, I think we do.
All right, go ahead, Michael.
So to answer a couple questions that Stephen brought up, the reason there's no compliment page is because compliments are not taken seriously. Have I got my police junior badge yet, guys? How about it? Can I get that? I mean, your brass thinks I need a police junior badge for congratulating an officer for handling a scene appropriately. I find it interesting that officer that I congratulated ditched your asses, and he's now on the Douglas County Sheriff's Department. I think that's a good move for that guy because I don't think he had a career in your department looking ahead, because those kind of people don't make it in your department. They get ran off. Stephen brought up a good point. Last month, Ms. Bickford pointed out the fact that and got Chief into a conversation where he decided to admit to some borderline USC violations, which I believe really do have some bearing on the conversation about police accountability around here. Because I think what we proved was that if it doesn't exist in the policy, they are going to exonerate the officer, regardless of the federal implications. And that can't happen. It can't. Because every time it does, they go further down the civil path. They get into further civil trouble, and they're going to get themselves in a lawsuit eventually. It's unfortunate that I don't have the standing to actually file that case because I didn't let you assholes actually violate my rights. I stood up for myself. There's too many people out there that won't stand up for themselves, and you're going to violate their rights. And part of what I do as Lawrence Accountability on YouTube, I'm going to go ahead and plug myself. I'm going to use these public meetings to start building my subscriber base. Lawrence Accountability on YouTube. I'm here to show the other side of the police department that you don't see, that they don't want to talk about. And I've shown quite a bit that you guys don't want to talk about, apparently. I think that last month's discussion regarding that threat really needs to be resolved. I said in that meeting that I was the complainant. I was here. Chief refused to freely and openly discuss that, but you're going to come in here and freely, openly and discuss Jayland Walker. That's pretty sad, man. We can't openly and freely discuss a complaint when the complainant's in the room, but you're going to talk about Jayland Walker like you really care. Your statistics from Warrensburg show that you don't care about Jayland Walker, and you don't care about Jeremy Rothkushel. That's what your statistics in Warrensburg showed, sir. That's all I have to say tonight.
Thank you, Michael. Do we have any other public comment for this agenda item?
Yes.
Jeremy Rothkushel, Lawrence, Kansas, Radical Middle of America. I just want to make a quick comment that I concur very much with there's a cultural problem here that is way bigger than just the police department. One example, I think, is what Mr. Watts talked about more generally, where one of our city managers, we sort of have a series of these city managers who pass through and make what seem to be small changes, such as destroying the written record of the actual commentary during these kinds of meetings, and then move on. And this is very, very important, reminding us again of our form of government. The public reasoning and the public knowledge is the most important thing in relationship to legitimate public governance on through the police department, through the city, and all of that. So I imagine this is more of an issue for the city commission. Then secondly, in terms of issues of culture, What Michael has pointed out about what goes on behind the scenes in terms of the nature of the commentary, very tongue-in-cheek, it's sort of very middle school-esque in a way. It doesn't seem to take the members of the public seriously. And so this is a much bigger issue than obviously just individual members onto the command staff and leadership of this department. We're seeing this nationwide. These are very big structural components, some of them cultural. I would point out one example of the thin blue line, a desecration of the flag. It's also, I would say it's seditious in intent in relationship to the founding nature of our government. It puts a blue line, basically, is that between the people and the government? Is that between chaos and order? That's a total seditious concept in relationship to we the people. We're all here together. This is our country, this is our city, this is our government, this is our police department. You need we the people to be respected and to also respect you, the public servants. So include us in your reasoning, respect our ability to understand what's going on. We may understand certain backgrounds, such as I have a deep lay expertise in relationship to the threat of Israeli intelligence. It's said to be an ally, but they've even attempted to assassinate Jewish American ambassadors who are trying to make peace in the region. They've run serious compromise programs at the highest levels of our government. And so I just wanted to urge a public reckoning and a reasoning with the issue of what is our real American civic culture and how it's been threatened more and more, especially after September 11th, where we've seen escalations of shootings based on a large array of reasons. Some of them, the militarization of police, the foreign training in Israel, but also at core, the escalation of a culture of disrespect of we the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. This is Chair Robinson. Do we have any? Oh, I apologize.
Yeah, I think we have one more.
Sorry. My name is Jason. I've been watching these meetings and observing, listening for quite some time. And today's the first day I've decided to come up here, and I find it a little disturbing that I'm staring at 3 police officers and no civilians. I mean, how is that supposed to look to me, to someone who, what if someone it took them a long time to work up the courage down here because maybe they had a bad encounter with a law enforcement officer and they come down here and that's all they see is law enforcement officers. I'm inclined to agree with Mr. Watts that in all of my observation, I have seen no purpose that this review board serves. I mean, it just to the out from the outside looking in, it appears to be a whole lot more of we have investigated ourselves and found ourselves clear of all wrongdoing. Thank you.
Thank you. And that was Jason, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. Do we have any other public comment on this agenda item?
Does not appear so.
Okay. Do we have any board discussion on this agenda item following public comment? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 3. I don't believe we need a vote on agenda item 2.
No, you don't.
So we'll go ahead and move on to number 3, and it will be a presentation on the UAV program with the Lawrence Police Department. And Deputy Chief Heffley will be giving that for us.
Thank you, Chair Robinson. I'm going to share my screen here, but I'm a bit of an amateur at this, so please let me know if you are not seeing something. My goal was to provide you some information and to sit for questions that you might have about a program that's relatively new, within a year of the police department. And this is going to be kind of high level, but if you've got questions, please ask whatever you'd like to. And then if you need to follow up later, I'm happy to talk about this. So last fall, the Lawrence Police Department began looking into a UAV program to supplement patrol response to in-progress critical incidents and amongst a couple other functions, which I'll talk about shortly. if I figure out how to operate. There we go. Okay, so three main areas of use for UAVs or UASs. That term is used interchangeably in law enforcement settings, specifically here in Lawrence. One, and probably the main one, is patrol response to incidents. We've utilized these devices in response to subjects fleeing. There was one fairly publicized incident in which somebody fled a domestic violence situation, hid in some neighboring woods, and was able to be located utilizing this technology without forcing an encounter that wasn't or that was able to be approached quite methodically and carefully. Second use is the investigation of crime scenes and crash scenes. Devices, UAVs, UASs are essentially just cameras that can move about the environment in 3D. We can utilize those devices to map a crime scene or a crash scene in a way that couldn't be done prior, allowing us to create a 3-dimensional, 2-dimensional, whatever prosecuting body needs to see of a rather large crime scene or crash scene, which is something I'll show you some pictures of later of some, not here, but some crash scenes that have been mapped in a way that just wasn't possible previously. Lastly, utilizing the devices for training and assisting in other city functions is something that there is value in. Training, documentation of how we're operating so that we can kind of go to the tape and come up with things we need to improve on in any of those situations. Additionally, we're in talks with fire and medical to assist them in the use of thermal cameras to assist in fire suppression and some of those incidents, high angle rescues and hazmat situations where we can provide real-time data without putting a person in a risky or dangerous situation. Mechanical inspections is something that has just come up of late. Other departments within the city are required to do certain inspections of places and situations that, again, can be very dangerous, and utilizing one of these devices removes a person and mitigates some of that risk. And which is a very good replacement for putting a person in a potentially bad situation. All department members that are authorized to operate the UAS devices by policy must be FAA Part 107 licensed pilots. Part 107 of the FAA code specifically addresses UAS piloting in a commercial environment, which, since they're operating it as part of their job, means commercial. It's a test through some training, and then a test that's required to be taken and passed with refreshing and retesting every several years. I've been through it myself. It is not a show up and guess your way through kind of deal. There's some study necessary, and it's a fairly comprehensive testing process. When we just started with policy development, this has been over a year now. This began when we talked about policy development for public safety cameras. I reached out to a couple of different groups in town looking for some feedback. One group, the Lawrence Libertarians, sat and provided some really good feedback and identified some concerns that we tried to address as best we could in policy, specifically towards record retention and their desire to have us not collecting large amounts of data and video and things like that. And I completely agree with their assessment of that. What we've gone to is a policy that adheres to state of Kansas record retention with a lean towards, if we don't need it for criminal purposes, then we do not retain it, which I think is a best practice. The second group was the American Civil Liberties Union. They were in a bit of a transition at the time locally, but we discussed it at length. They didn't have a specific concern to be addressed, but did have some general concerns about any additional use of technology and the potential of privacy issues with the public. We have gone outside to several different agencies around the country to look at best practices. The policy for the cameras, which rolled into the policy for the UAS systems, was developed with a basis of President Obama's sanctioned Department of Justice report, and I could provide you the report at a later time, which talked about the development of UAS systems in law enforcement. The other one was a product of the ACLU for best practices, and we tried to use those as our basis, knowing that this is a technology that can be used incorrectly, and we wanted to do our best to prevent that from occurring now or 10, 15 years down the line when the people who began this project aren't around. So there are Fourth Amendment issues with the use of UASs, and I'm not going to go into great detail, but I do want to provide some basis. The Supreme Court has not weighed in on Fourth Amendment issues directly related to UASs. They have provided guidance on several other cases which are at least tangential. Katz versus U.S. has to do with the case was somebody speaking on a phone book and in a phone booth, trying to at least have a conversation with some reasonable expectation of privacy, in which the government invaded that. The Supreme Court decided that was an invasion of a reasonable expectation of privacy. So it does provide some guidance there. The second one that is, again, not on point, but close. There is some case law that has to do with manned flight, meaning helicopters, airplanes. And they held at the time that manned flight looking into a backyard was not a violation. However, there is more recent case law at a state level in Michigan that is starting to lean towards the use of a UAS is different than a helicopter, and the FAA has acknowledged that by creating different rules. And therefore, a search of a backyard using a UAS would constitute a search, and therefore, if it was a warrantless search, a violation of someone's rights. This is our basis for how we operate. I believe it is much better for us to be on the strict adherence to this side than to be pressing any issues. So that is our approach in how we use and provide guidance for the use of these devices. Just to show you that this is not something that's taken lighthearted or that's not very strictly controlled, we have pre-flight procedures that include restrictions having to do with weather, fog, temperatures, KP, which has to do with solar flares coming off the sun, creating electromagnetic interference, the number of visible satellites. We were talking about telescope a little earlier in the meeting tonight. We get into number of acquired satellites to correctly locate a device prior to us launching and taking off to fly an operation. And then there's some leeway when we get into some wind gusts that are a little less, some things like that. But I'm just trying to provide some information on how deep we get into specifics before we even consider a device leaving the ground. We utilize some different programs that are available to anybody who would choose to find this, but they provide some early, easy visual indications based on standards that we apply, whether or not it's safe to proceed. This, again, is just one more level of checks and balances. There are restricted airspaces in our city, and it's actually quite complex, and I'll show you here in the next slide. But there is a long series of rules that we have to follow in order to fly safely and within FAA guidelines. One reason being the Lawrence Municipal Airport and the approach of the airport. So that does affect our use of these devices, and we are keenly aware of the need to operate safely. This is just to provide you a little context. This is an aerial chart of the region and how complex it is in Kansas, which, isn't super populated. We don't have a ton of large metropolitan airports, but the airspace is controlled considerably in many different areas. And this is a requirement for our pilots to understand this, be able to read these charts and know where it is and is not okay to proceed, and then communicate with the FAA and control towers in Kansas City when emergencies arise. This specifically is Lawrence, and you can see that it takes some studying to understand what you're looking at, what you're dealing with, and again, continuing education and a requirement that we impress upon our people that this is not something that's to be taken lightly. When requesting an authority to take off and fly a mission, we have to proceed through an FAA certified, at least FAA application to receive authorization to fly at low altitudes and capability. When we do this, we remain in contact with the FAA. We've had instances, and I would point out the derailment north of town, which was precariously close to the airport. Our pilot that was there worked very closely with the control tower in Kansas City to make sure that there was no safety issues or safety concerns added to a situation which was already pretty dangerous. This is a grid map of Lawrence and authorizations of different altitudes that can be flown in. Again, as you can see, it just adds to the layer of complexity that we're requiring of our people to understand and be able to navigate. The airspace restrictions must be adhered to strictly. The FAA is not flexible, and they don't like the rules to be violated, but we do have outlets to contact them through the SOSC in Kansas City. And again, just communicating with them and making sure that we are adhering to all rules, safety rules, and so forth. Prior to taking off, we require our pilots to go through a checklist, and this is the checklist before they leave the ground. Some things can be done rather quickly. It's a topical inspection of an airframe, removal of gimbal shield, things like that can be done quickly. But as the FAA has proven over the years, checklists are good ways to ensure that safety checks are done in a manner that is appropriate for the given situation. So going on that direction, we have instituted those procedures. When a flight is over, video and photographs are submitted to the evidence management system, as is body camera video. It is categorized based on the incident. If it's training, it's categorized as such. If it's a criminal incident where there's criminal evidence or evidence of a potential crime, it's categorized as such and retained on the same retention schedule as body camera video. This is done intentionally because it is the same type of video evidence that would or could be used in a prosecution. And then additionally, we have an internal UAS deployment form. That is so I, as the program director, can manage and know about all the deployments throughout the year. We can produce a report at the end of the year to determine the value of the program, to make sure that it's meeting the goals of the city, the goals of the department, and that it's of value to the community. I want to talk about equipment. We'll do it pretty quick, but I do think it's important because there's some good information and some misinformation out there about what these devices are, what they can and can't do, and I want to make sure that I'm able to speak to that. So there's some talk about thermal camera and RGB camera, which is just your standard digital camera. On the right, you see still image captured from one of our US devices, and it's the RGB camera. It's very similar to a GoPro camera or somewhere between a GoPro and what you would see in a digital SLR camera. They're good cameras, but they are essentially consumer grade cameras. On the left, you see an image of a thermal camera. This is a picture that's taken measuring the heat difference per pixel on the imager, and then it reproduces an image. What I've heard from time to time are concerns that a thermal camera will look through a wall, through a window, into a house. The reason I wanted you to see this picture is this is a true and accurate representation of what a thermal camera sees when it looks at a window. It will often see a reflection or a reflection of heat from glass, but it will not see through glass. It will not see through walls, at least not anything that we could ever have access to. This technology is commercially available to anybody who chooses to buy one. This is not government, law enforcement specific or anything like that. Similar photograph of the top-down view. Again, what you can see is heat emanating from vehicles and people. But as you can see, detail starts to fade pretty quick from elevation. And again, just a little bit further back picture, the point of me showing you this is I want to at least speak to the concerns that thermal technology is looking into people's residences, cars, things like that. And then from a distance, the zoom of a thermal camera is extremely, well, I shouldn't say extremely, it's poor. You start getting some real pixelation and a loss of detail. So making out finite detail is not something that's done with commercial grade FLIR or other thermal technology. This is what I was trying to speak to a little bit earlier when we talk about crash scenes, crash reconstruction scenes. So this represents a traffic crash scene, and I did take this from online. This isn't one of ours. But what it represents is the crash investigation of a scene, which is about a city block, maybe a little bit short of half a block, but to a city block. And if any of you are photographers, to try and take a picture that's a city block in the middle of the dark is rather difficult, I would say. It's a near impossibility without an extraordinary amount of equipment in the past. These devices are capable of stitching together different frames and rendering a three-dimensional map, similar to what technology we have for inside of residences when we are processing a crime scene. We have a laser system which is used very commonly in crime scene documentation amongst law enforcement agencies to reconstruct a crime scene in the moment that they're there. Measuring using LiDAR and some other technology to reconstruct that. So for prosecution 1 to 2 to 3 years later, they can reproduce at the moment of the incident what that scene looked like. The use of UASs for this has taken that to an outside larger scale. We can do this in an efficient manner rather than several investigators or crime scene technicians taking 5 to 6 hours to document this scene. A UAS and some peripheral equipment can document this scene efficiently and effectively in a fraction of that amount of time. And that allows us to release scenes, open up scenes, and start taking care of other things in a crime scene or traffic crash situation. That is all I have formally, but I'd be interested to know if you have any questions or concerns or anything you'd like to speak to. Let me stop.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Heffley. So looks like Board Member Minor has a question.
Yes, and I apologize if I missed this statement, but in regards to search and seizure and drones, what does the city of Lawrence and the state of Kansas, what is the city of Lawrence and the state of Kansas position on using that tool for searches and seizures? Do they have to get a search warrant before a drone is used, more specifically?
So to broadly answer your question, the search and seizure rules that would apply to any other instance of a law enforcement officer or government official entering, searching, seizing property apply directly to the UAS, meaning if I'm going to search a building, a house, a piece of property in which you have done some action to provide a reasonable expectation of privacy, and I would need a search warrant for it as an officer, then I will need a search warrant for it to use a UAS. We are going a little bit further in the constrictive way of currently under Supreme Court case law, a helicopter can fly over a residence and look in the backyard, and it's not considered a violation of somebody's expectation of privacy. But we are taking the position that a UAS is a different animal, and if that is the task to be done, then a search warrant would be required by policy.
Thank you.
Any other board member discussion or questions?
Board Member Bickford, I have quite a few questions. And the reason that I did not want to change the agenda this evening is because we would typically be prepared to receive information and have an opportunity to review presentation materials ahead of time. Whereas this is a topic where also the community might want some advance notice that it was going to be discussed so that they could be involved and see the materials ahead of time and be prepared for public comments should they feel so inclined. So I'd like to reserve an opportunity to come back and maybe address some of the other items here. So I will compliment you. It was a nice presentation. I do think that you guys have done a lot as far as the physical safety of operating the equipment and going over that process. I learned a lot of things. So I think that that was very thorough. I think that the pieces on privacy and surveillance and those issues are incredibly important to civilians, and that should probably we should probably have a little bit more thorough presentation on those policies and those considerations. I appreciate the community engagement, reaching out to the folks that you did to get their perspectives and their input. I think that community engagement is something that our community as a whole really needs to focus on doing, and finding the right groups that have the right perspectives and the right ties to those issues. So I have questions about how the data is being used generally, how it's being stored, how it's being transferred. And those are maybe things that are in a contract that you have for data storage that we could be presented with. And then to the extent that any of this may or may not be using facial recognition technology, I have some pretty big concerns about its accuracy, particularly among racial groups. They are least accurate for female Black individuals. And so there's a lot of room for some racial-based issues there. So I'm curious what the conversation was there in the use and the application. Then the thermal camera image of the SUV, was there anyone inside of that vehicle or any thermally dynamic objects within the vehicle that would have created a thermal change in the image? Or was that just a vehicle that had been sitting at the same temperature prior to that image being taken? And then I guess my last question right at this moment is, you said that the data retention policies that are being applied to body cameras are being applied to UAS video. I'm wondering about the policy as far as individual wanting to review that footage to the extent that they are involved in the footage, if that policy is the same as body cam footage, or if there is a different policy, or if that policy itself has not been addressed as of yet. Okay, those are my initial comments, and I'll let you respond.
Thank you. I am completely open to coming back. I do apologize for the late notice on this, but I'm very comfortable coming back and addressing specific questions and concerns. I do know there's going to be a ton of them. I knew initially when we started talking about this that there was no way we were going to get to everybody's concerns or even hear everybody out that would have a concern, but I have no issue coming back. But I'd like to try and address the questions that you had right now, if that's okay. You spoke to data use. The data use, the video and still photographs that are captured is used in the exact same way that crime scene photo or body camera currently is utilized. If it's necessary for a court case proceeding, then it's retained based on the statutes that direct the retention of those. If it's not for use of a criminal case, then it is deleted and not retained. The video is stored in the same manner as, quite frankly, the video cards when the device is taken back to the station are removed and it's uploaded directly into evidence.com, which is where our body camera video lives. This is a practice that many law enforcement agencies that have body-worn cameras utilize evidence.com, and it's there that we apply the rules of retention to it, so it automatically purges video that is not needed to be stored. And I can elaborate on that if there's more questions about that process. The department as a whole does not use facial recognition in any way. We don't use it on the UASs. We don't use it on the stationary cameras. We don't use it in any third-party application that's come up of late. We do not use it. And not to say that it's not possible. I don't want to mislead you or be not completely transparent. There are applications that have that ability. You can take just about any camera out there and feed it into certain things and utilize facial recognition. We have made a conscious decision based on community desires, needs, to not utilize facial recognition. And that is a conversation I had in the city commission meeting, and I'm not going to be able to get the date. Commissioner Ananda asked me specifically when we were talking about public safety camera systems in the downtown area, are these facial recognition cameras? And my answer to her is what my answer to you all is. Any camera has the potential to run that software. I hear the concern of the community. We hear the concern of the community, and we are not using facial recognition technology. I know there's a lot of problems with it. Now, that being said, there are technologies that will identify a vehicle, and I do believe that there are uses for a technology that will pour through 12 to 15 to 80 hours of video and pick out a red truck. Because that's an effective use of time. However, if you start talking about identifying people, it gets really dicey really quick. And quite frankly, I share your concerns and I'm not comfortable with that. I'm just going down the list here. Thermal, as to the picture of the car, I can't honestly answer whether or not somebody was in that car. That picture was from one of my sergeant's presentations, and I stole it from him. So I will, in fact, recreate the situation you're describing because it's a good test. And I have no problem recreating it and then presenting it to you at a later time just so that you understand what it does and what it doesn't do, and that I can speak with 100% confidence of what we're looking at. And then you spoke to a data retention policy. So the data retention policy is dictated to us by the Kansas State Historical Society. That is articulated in our department policy. I believe it's in the procedural manual, which is on our website. I printed out a copy of our UAS policy and brought it with me, not thinking that we weren't going to all be in person. I would be happy to send it to anybody. It is posted publicly on the website. There is a portion that I would like to read to you if you would tolerate me doing that just for a second, because it is of note. Prohibited uses. The UAS video surveillance equipment shall not be used to conduct random surveillance activities, to target a person based solely on individual characteristics such as, but not limited to, race, ethnicity, national origin, religion, disability, gender, or sexual orientation. And then the last one, which I think is extremely important, to harass, intimidate, or discriminate against any group or individual. These devices are not used to monitor people, and it's in policy, exercising their First Amendment rights. That's just not what we're doing. We have used them in large group situations, such as the Final Four, when we had a significant amount of safety concern. But even to speak to that, we were completely outnumbered by privately owned UASs that were in the area and operating very unsafely. And there's a lot of concern that we have with that. So I don't want to go down too much of a rabbit hole, and I want to hit your concerns correctly. And then your last question, I apologize, I can't even read my own writing.
Sure.
Yeah,
My comment as to the retention, you mentioned that those are being done with the same policies and retention schedule as the body cam footage. My question then was, are the policies for access to being able to view those videos the same as the policies that are applied to body cam footage? So if an individual is involved in the incident that's captured on a body cam, then they have a right to review that. Is the policy the same? Is it silent as to that issue? I don't know that that's in state statute at this point. I would have to.
Yes. So the policy for UAS devices does not specifically speak to that concern. However, we have tried to draw a hard connection between this video evidence and any other video evidence. If you are able to see it because you are the subject of the video, then we would lean towards what state law requires, which is allowance of viewing of that video by yourself, your guardian, or your, and I blanking on the last point of that. I think it's your somebody who controls your estate in the statute, I think is what it says. So to answer your question directly, yes, you would be able to view that if you are the subject of that.
But that is not written in your current policy.
Correct.
Okay. Are we open to revisiting that language and maybe including some so that we can make it clear to folks that if they are the subject of footage, they have the right to view that?
Yes, I'm open to looking and talking through policies and tweaking them to suit our needs. These aren't carved in stone, and they change with technology and they change with legislation, obviously. Of course, if there's a community desire to see that articulated specifically in the policy, I would have no problem sitting and talking through this with anybody.
Thank you very much. You addressed those really well. I went through them pretty fast. So thank you for answering.
And Jordan, just so you know, right now it's in state law. So we have to abide by state law. So there is a provision there to ensure that if somebody's the subject, they can see it. And then we can also look at the policy edition as well to make it more clear.
Okay. And yeah, I'll have to take a minute to look at that. Again, we weren't aware that this was going to be a subject of discussion this evening.
Well, the whole purpose of it is an informational thing. The technology has already been approved. It's already in policy. It's already in use. So what I'm trying to do for you all is to give you some examples of what we do and provide it as an informational item. So that's why it was, that's the purpose of it being presented.
Sure. Information is better when the audience is prepared to ask questions and get more relevant information to the concerns of the audience. So I appreciate the information.
Sure.
Thank you, Board Member Bickford. Board Member Minor.
Yes, one question, and I hope you haven't answered it already. Retention time. You said you retain the video, et cetera, if it's not criminal or things like that for a certain amount of time. What time is that? How long is that?
I didn't answer it specifically because I was a little reluctant to name the day amount without that schedule in front of me. If there's no evidentiary value and there's no other category assigned to it, I believe it's 90 days. But without that in front of me, I have to give it as a qualified answer, and I believe it's 90 days. I could provide that, and we can tag that. I tried to get that schedule individually posted online just so that it was more apparent. But I will get that to you so that you could see that, because that also pertains to body camera video. And I know that's of concern to many people about the amount of video that's being retained. And I completely understand that concern.
Yeah, and then to further comment, if you have body camera video that you retain for 3 years, for example, and someone has a complaint later on, one would like to be able to review that and compare notes. And if you're getting rid of it at a short amount of time, that doesn't provide the citizen an opportunity for their review.
Yes, there is a very delicate balancing act going on there of we want to provide for a historical record in case there is a complaint of an issue or incident. However, it is in, I believe I could speak to some concern that I heard from Lawrence Libertarians and some other groups, and not just them, that any government entity retaining large amounts of video of the citizen population is not something desirable either. I'm sensitive to that, and I completely understand that perspective. We have gone with what state law refers us to, which is the Kansas State Historical Society's schedule. If we believe there's a complaint, it does not go away at 90 days. If we believe there's a criminal act caught, we do not delete it at 90 days. 90 days is in our minds at the time, an innocuous video of a takeoff, a test flight, and then a land. That still provides for 3 months of somebody to approach and say, I have concerns about that. Can you look at that? And at that time we still document every flight. So we have flight logs. We document all the flights. So even if somebody approached several years later and said, I have concerns about what went on that day, we would be able to reproduce a large amount of information, short of video potentially, but a large amount of information to investigate something like that.
All right, thank you for this discussion. Is there any other board member questions or discussion about this presentation? Okay, we'll move to public comment on this agenda item. I see Stephen has his hand raised. If it's all right, we'll go ahead and start with Stephen.
Aren't I lucky? Yeah. Once again, these guys, man, they love talking about the policy. The policy is written by Lexipol on the West Coast. Are you familiar with the drone policy? Have any of you read the policy and procedure manual? I have many times. It's a piece of shit, he said bluntly, because there's nothing in there that talks. I found it very curious when Mr. Heffley noted the shall. Woo, that's probably 4 times inside that 10,000 page manual. The word shall is written in there. If you review policy, let me see, 609, I think it is. Yeah, 609. Read it. It doesn't say anything, just basic stuff. And these guys are putting up with it, and I appreciate it. 99% of police work is da 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 da. We want to focus on the 1% and 2% stuff that really happens. The utilization of these drones, UAVs, if you will. Why are the police talking to me about case law? That's what a lawyer does. The airspace above my property is private. The Supreme Court decided that a long time ago. Chief and Mr. Heffley, Mr. Lockhart, Mr. Heffley both said not using facial recognition software. What we really want to add is 3 dots, ... this week. These guys, man, they mince these words and they get away with it. They get away with it. You guys let them do it. We still haven't an answer to the question about using threats. Anyway, yeah. It'll be nice to be able to visit this in a public forum with all kinds of people throwing questions. And when Mr. Heffley says the libertarians, what other group? Name me the other groups. They never do. They name 1/3 and then they move on. It's all good. Next. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Do we have any in-person public comment for this agenda item? Jeremy?
Yes, thank you. Jeremy Rothkushel, Lawrence, Kansas. The 2 questions I have is, again, relating to video analytics, a brief cam. Is the investigations division utilizing BriefCam, and in what manner? And I understand that Heffley, you basically said that you're not utilizing it in general, is what I understand. But then you also seem to say that any video source could be fed into it. I think you actually were very specific. You said facial recognition was not being utilized. And now I imagine BriefCam video analytics can do all kinds of after the fact analytics in terms of looking through hours and hours of footage. So that's my first question. Can the drone footage be fed into BriefCam, for example, analytic technology and databases, if investigations division is doing it? That's one. And then my second question has to do with the retention of not only this video data, but also the body cam data. You mentioned evidence.com. I'm not familiar with that. Is that a cloud service? Where are the servers? Who has access to the servers? And we found that there was a proposal to put the hands of the Pentagon's JEDI Cloud, the Joint Enterprise Defense Infrastructure Initiative, to basically outsource or corporatize the Pentagon's data cloud. And it was being pushed from certain elements into the hands of Microsoft's Azure Cloud, which had very recently before acquired an Israeli military intelligence group and put it in charge of its cloud app security. So there's all these kinds of a litany of these kinds of, I would say, cyber threats. And especially with the rise of cyber war, we need to begin to really look at the nature of databases, where our material is, where our video footage is. So I'd be interested in hearing more about the specifics of both evidence.com and the nature of feeding how investigations division can acquire any video footage and then put it into something like BriefCam analytics. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Do we have any other public comment in person on this agenda item?
No, he's the only one here.
Okay. Thank you for that presentation, Deputy Chief Heffley, and for engaging with us and answering our questions tonight. We really appreciate it.
And again, let me extend the invitation. If you all want to come out, and they train regularly, if you want to come out and watch training and see how it works, it's really pretty cool. And it's a great resource for us, and it's going to help keep Lawrence safe and secure.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Is there any other board discussion on this agenda item? Okay. we can go ahead and move on. And before we adjourn tonight, I just want to say it's my apologies. I didn't add onto the agenda that we would choose who was going to serve on the Community Police Oversight Work Group. It slipped my mind, and so it'll be on next month's agenda. So start thinking about if you would like to be a part of that work group. We'll choose our 3 members at that meeting. Any questions about that or anything? Any other things of note tonight? Board Member Littleton.
Thanks, Jenny. This is Board Member Littleton. I was just wanted to ask the chief, maybe since it's been a couple of months, if I can get kind of an idea of when the city commission might, I think I had heard from the last video I watched from June 9th that the city commission has 30 days that they're trying to select the 5 community members. Do we have a timeline, maybe, Chief, when the work group might be able to begin work?
I haven't heard from them as far as selections go. Brandon did let me know that we had, I believe, 3 proposals for the facilitator that were responsive to the RFP. So I think we're going to be working, bringing that back to you all next month. And so hopefully by then we'll have something from the commission on who their members will be. And my guess is maybe late August, maybe early September, we'll have our first meeting.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry, I have to throw this in here, Ms. Robinson, and that is, will this facilitator be just like the consultant that came to town, another group of police people who believe in police people ideas and have like the brains of a pea? Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Board Member Minor, I make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Board Member Murray Taylor, make a second that motion.
All right. Let's vote to adjourn. Board Member Littleton.
Aye.
Board Member Minor.
Aye.
Board Member Taylor.
Board Member Murray Taylor, aye.
Board Member Bickford.
Board Member Bickford, aye.
And Chair Robinson, aye. Vote passes. We are adjourned. Thank you all so much.
Bye, guys. Have a good week.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.